Right now, somewhere in a suburb of Manila, a family is deciding whether to cook dinner or save the gas. In rural Brazil, a farmer is running the numbers on whether he can afford the fertilizer his crops need this season. The math is not working out. None of these people started a war. None of them voted for one. But all of them are paying for it. On February 28, 2026, American and Israeli missiles struck the skies above Tehran. That single military operation acted as a highly specific catalyst, setting off a chain reaction that is quietly dismantling the economy of every country on Earth. This chart illustrates the immediate financial shock that followed. When the first missiles hit, oil was trading at around $70 a barrel. Within days, it crossed $80, then $100. It peaked at an astounding $126 before settling this week at $111. That is a jump of more than $40 a barrel in just 35 days. To understand why the market reacted this way, look at this map of the Strait of Hormuz. It sits between Iran and Oman. At its narrowest point, it is roughly 33 kilometers wide. Before this conflict, roughly 20 million barrels of oil, 1/5 of everything the entire world consumes, passed through this specific narrow channel every single day. On March 2nd, a senior IRGC commander stood in front of cameras and announced, "The strait is closed." Within 48 hours, insurance companies pulled out, making it financially suicidal for any commercial ship to attempt a crossing. Kuwait, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia began shutting down their wells. They didn't run out of oil. Their storage tanks simply filled up, and their only exit route was blocked. Closing this single waterway severed the primary energy artery of the global economy, trapping a massive percentage of the world's power supply behind an uninsurable conflict zone. The Dallas Federal Reserve projects this closure alone will subtract an annualized 2.9 percentage points from global GDP. Against last year's 3.3% growth, that leaves the world economy on a razor's edge, stalling out while Goldman Sachs and Oxford Economics warn of a confirmed slide into recession for the US and Europe. But energy markets are only the first domino. The Persian Gulf is also one of the world's largest fertilizer factories. Between 30 and 35% of the world's urea exports, the primary nitrogen fertilizer that sustains global crop yields, come from these exact Gulf countries and transit the exact same strait. Since the closure, urea prices have spiked 50%. Nations like Brazil import 85% of their fertilizer to maintain their status as massive exporters of soybeans and corn. At these new prices, Brazilian farmers are being forced to either plant less acreage or switch to less intensive crops. The true terror of agricultural economics is the delay. The crops getting planted right now dictate the food supply months from now. The decisions farmers are forced into today by surging fertilizer prices will manifest as a severe physical shortage of global food during the 2027 harvest. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization confirmed this week that global food prices have already hit their highest level since last September. They are forecasting a 6% rise across all of 2026, warning that a prolonged conflict will decimate global yields. Surging energy costs act as a hidden, unavoidable tax on the biological inputs required to grow crops. When fuel becomes expensive, farming becomes expensive, and eating becomes expensive. The fallout is tearing through domestic power grids. Iranian missiles struck Qatar's Ras Laffan industrial city, instantly reducing the country's export capacity by 17%. Europe, already sitting on dangerously low gas storage after a harsh winter, is now facing a massive shortage. Germany and Italy are at genuine risk of technical recessions by the end of the year. Global transport logistics are freezing up. Insurance premiums have doubled or tripled. Shipping routes have up 30%. Commercial airlines are burning highly expensive fuel to reroute around the Middle East, entirely wiping out the industry's forecast of $41 billion in record profits for the year. For nations heavily reliant on imported energy, the crisis requires extreme measures. The Philippines, which buys 98% of its oil from the Middle East, declared a national state of energy emergency. President Marcos introduced a mandatory 4-day working week to force fuel conservation across the population. Inside the Gulf states themselves, the disruption looks like a humanitarian emergency. Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain rely on the strait for over 80% of their food imports. Retailers are resorting to airlifting staples. Iranian missiles have also struck desalination plants, cutting off the source of 99% of drinking water in Kuwait and Qatar. While water and food supplies dry out abroad, the Financial Times uncovered something highly specific on Wall Street. Exactly 15 minutes before Donald Trump published a statement announcing a pause in attacks on Iran, $580 million in bets were placed against the price of oil. When the statement went live and prices dropped, those short sellers secured extraordinary profits. Trump has repeatedly claimed the United States is insulated from this chaos because it produces over 13 million barrels of oil domestically. This dual-axis chart demonstrates exactly why that is false. As the global price of Brent crude climbs, average U.S. gasoline prices follow directly. That inflation feeds into interest rates, forcing the average American 30-year mortgage rate past 6.38%. Because energy is a globally traded commodity, domestic production abundance offers absolutely no shelter. Every American paying off a mortgage is subsidizing a war thousands of miles away. Industry analysts have drawn a hard line. The Strait of Hormuz must reopen by mid-April. If it remains closed past that deadline, the current disruption doubles. The global market will lose 10 million barrels a day, commercial inventories will halve, and the global economy will enter a phase of strict physical rationing. Bloomberg Economics published a model for what happens if the standoff persists. They project oil could hit $200 a barrel. For context, the highest price in modern history was $147 in July 2008, a spike that triggered a global recession within 6 months. The United States initiated the military action that caused the closure. Yet when Britain convened 40 nations to discuss reopening the waterway, the US did not attend. Instead, Washington is requesting a $1.5 trillion defense budget, the highest in American history, while expecting allied nations to manage the resulting economic fallout. Iran is openly using this dynamic to fracture Western alliances. Unable to match the US militarily, Tehran is targeting civilian and energy infrastructure to ensure the economic pain is felt globally. The strategy is working. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, typically a staunch ally of the US administration, publicly disagreed with the strikes. France has blocked US supply planes from its airspace. A global consensus is building rapidly against continued escalation. Pope Francis personally called the Israeli president to urge dialogue, joining a chorus of nations demanding an end to a conflict they can no longer afford to subsidize. Modern wars are won or lost on the battlefield, but they are sustained at supermarket checkouts and petropumps. For the average citizen, the economic damage of the last 36 days is already permanent. The cumulative damage to basic purchasing power and stability has already been tabulated.